July 2nd, 1944. Saipan Island, Pacific Ocean. The heat and humidity pressed down through dense jungles and jagged cliffs, creating a hellish landscape for the advancing U.S. Marines. Fear, anger, and tension hung heavy in the air. Every step could be the last. But among hundreds of battle-hardened soldiers, a single teenager appeared, just 17 years old, about to do the impossible. His name was Guy Gabaldon, and he was preparing to capture an entire unit of Japanese soldiers without firing a single shot. At dawn, Guy carefully moved along narrow trails winding through cliffs and jungle. He knew every rock, every tree, every crevice. For an ordinary Marine, this would have been a death trap, but for him it was opportunity. Japanese soldiers guarded each house and cave like miniature fortresses, complete with hidden mines, machine gun nests, and grenades. But Guy had an advantage that couldn't be measured in firepower. He spoke Japanese fluently and understood the culture and habits of his enemy, making him an invisible threat. During the day, he watched the soldiers studying patrol routes, routines, and their level of alertness. He noticed fatigue and demoralization, realizing that the enemy didn't know the exact number of Allied forces nearby. At night, he approached their positions and shouted in Japanese, creating the illusion of an entire army behind him. "Surrender! Your chances are 0. You'll return home alive." His voice echoed through cliffs and jungle. The first groups of soldiers emerged from their shelters, stunned, seeing nothing but a single teenager before them. Each day, Guy refined his tactics. He shifted positions, used shadows and cliffs, and shouted from multiple points to create the illusion of a large assault. Every movement was calculated, every step measured to the second. The soldiers began to doubt themselves, checking every sound, every movement. Panic grew and the number of captives increased. In the first few days, he captured hundreds of soldiers, each new prisoner intensifying the effect of fear. Guy crept toward the most dangerous positions, caves and bunkers where soldiers prepared to fight to the death. He acted quietly but decisively, making it appear that an entire Marine company was behind him. At night, he moved along cliffs, listening for rustles, using darkness and terrain for camouflage, enhancing the illusion of being everywhere at once. Sometimes he shouted from different points to make the enemy believe multiple attacks were happening. Soldiers, exhausted and terrified, began to surrender. Guy moved from cave to cave, bunker to bunker, taking prisoners without a single shot fired. Every step was risky, every movement could cost him his life, yet he advanced confidently, masterfully using language, psychology, and terrain. Day turned into night, night into day, and the number of captives continued to rise. On the third night, Guy approached a group of soldiers considered untouchable. They huddled in a rocky niche surrounded by deadly cliffs, unaware that one teenager could change their fate. Guy took a deep breath, preparing for the decisive step, and moved forward, almost invisible in the shadows, his voice ready to unleash commands that could alter the course of events. Guy moved carefully along the rocky ledges, each step deliberate, each movement concealed. The Japanese soldiers were growing suspicious, listening to every rustle, checking every sound, guarding their fortifications like hawks. But Guy knew their habits and weaknesses. He understood that in this battle, weapons alone did not determine the outcome. Psychological warfare could be stronger than any gunfire. He used his voice echoing across the cliffs, shouting commands from multiple points at once to create the illusion of numerous attacking units. In the dark caves, the soldiers heard what seemed like an entire company surrounding them. One by one, they stepped out, stunned and terrified. Each new captive intensified the pressure on those remaining, making resistance appear futile and enemy strength seemingly overwhelming. One night, Guy approached a small cave at the edge of a cliff where some of the most stubborn soldiers were hiding. These men were considered fanatics, ready to fight to their last breath. His heart raced, but his breathing was controlled, his voice prepared for the command that would decide the outcome. He stepped into view and shouted in Japanese, "Surrender! You will return home alive!" The echo amplified his voice, giving the impression of an entire army. The soldiers froze, then slowly lowered their weapons. Step by step, Guy directed them to a safe area, maintaining order and control without firing a single shot. Every movement was a calculated risk, every second crucial, but the teenage Marine advanced with precision and confidence. The following days tested his endurance. Guy moved from stronghold to stronghold, from cave to cave, using every element of the terrain, shadows, cliffs, jungle, to create the impression of overwhelming numbers. With each passing day, the number of prisoners grew. Hundreds, then over 1,000, surrendered to one teenager acting as if he commanded a battalion. Sometimes he employed subtle misdirection, rustling leaves, shouted commands from different locations, moving shadows, all designed to confuse the enemy. The Japanese soldiers, exhausted and fearful, could no longer distinguish reality from illusion. Guy moved quietly but decisively, showing that the power of the situation rested entirely in his hands. Days blended into nights, tension mounting with every passing hour. Guy sensed he had reached a critical point. The most dangerous groups remained, hidden in the rocks, ready to fight to the death. He paused briefly, listening to the wind, analyzing the light, and slipped along the cliffside, nearly invisible in the darkness. Each step brought him closer to a new victory. Each move tested his courage and agility. By the fourth night, Guy reached the last of the toughest Japanese soldiers. These fighters were fanatical, fearless, and determined to hold their position. But Guy acted with absolute confidence. He glided along the rocks, using darkness and terrain, his voice echoing through the jungle. "Surrender! Your lives can be saved!" The effect was immediate. Stunned by his cleverness, fear, and their own exhaustion, the soldiers began to comply. One by one, they stepped out of their hiding spots, leaving weapons behind, becoming captives. The young Marine controlled the situation with calm authority, guiding them safely, every action precise and deliberate, as though a full command staff stood behind him. Guy's audacity, strategy, and knowledge of psychology allowed him to continue advancing, increasing the number of prisoners each day. The story of his actions was spreading among the troops. One person, armed with intelligence, bravery, and cunning, could change the course of an entire battlefield. Night turned to day to night, yet the teenage Marine remained unseen but all-seeing, orchestrating events and expanding his impact with every calculated step. By the dawn of the fourth day, Guy had reached the most fortified Japanese position on the island. It was a rocky bastion, controlling all nearby trails and jungle approaches. Here the most fanatical soldiers had entrenched themselves, ready to fight to the last breath. But Guy did not hesitate. He studied every access path, every crack in the rocks, every hiding place. His movements were precise, like a predator stalking its prey. He used sounds and shadows to create the illusion of multiple attacking forces. Sudden shouts from different points, echoes bouncing off cliffs. The enemy began to believe that an entire American company surrounded them. One by one, the soldiers emerged, confused and terrified, slowly lowering their weapons. Each new captive reinforced the effect, making resistance appear futile and enemy strength seemingly overwhelming. Among these soldiers were officers, confident in their invincibility. Guy knew he had to break them psychologically. Speaking in Japanese with calm authority, he promised safe surrender, explaining that resistance would only bring death. His commanding voice and precise actions gave the impression that control over the situation was absolute. Days blurred into nights. Guy moved from cave to cave, stronghold to stronghold, using every element of terrain, rocks, trails, shadows, to enhance the illusion of overwhelming force. With each step, the number of captives grew. By the fifth night, it had reached nearly 1,500 soldiers, all captured by a single teenager acting as if he led an entire battalion. The enemy could not comprehend what had happened. Fear, fatigue, and psychological pressure did their work. Guy observed every movement with keen attention. Sometimes he shifted positions, making noise to simulate new attacks, creating an impression of multiple units advancing. The Japanese, worn and terrified, could no longer discern reality from illusion. He moved quietly but decisively, showing that power rested entirely in his hands. Nights grew longer, tension mounting with every moment. Guy sensed that the final, most dangerous positions remained, soldiers prepared to fight to the last man. He paused, listening to the wind, studying the shadows, then slipped along the cliffside, nearly invisible. Every step brought him closer to completing his mission, each move a test of courage and precision. At daybreak on the sixth day, Guy approached the last of the toughest soldiers. These men were fearless, fanatical, determined to defend their position to the death. Yet Guy acted with calm confidence. Gliding along the cliffs using darkness and terrain, his voice echoed across the jungle. Surrender. Your lives can be saved. The result was instantaneous. Stunned by his skill, exhausted and afraid, the soldiers surrendered. One by one, they stepped out of hiding, leaving their weapons behind, becoming captives. The young Marine controlled the situation with unmatched authority, directing them safely, each action precise as if a full command staff guided him. At this stage, Guy Gabaldon proved the extraordinary. One person, armed with intelligence, courage, and psychology, could change the course of military events. Hundreds, then thousands of Japanese soldiers surrendered without a single shot fired. His mastery of terrain, language, shadows, and psychological tactics made the impossible possible. The story continued. Night turned to day to night, yet the teenager remained unseen, orchestrating events with unmatched skill. Each step expanded his impact, turning fear into surrender, chaos into order. Guy's actions became legendary, a demonstration that bravery, cunning, and intellect could surpass raw numbers, leaving a mark on the battlefield that would never be forgotten.